In 1996, a scientist sat inside a lab at Howard University. He stared at his screen. He had run the same test 3 times, and each time it came back the same. That should have been impossible. The sample came from bone, dug out of the cold ground under Lower Manhattan. It belonged to a woman who died sometime in the 1700s. Nobody alive could put a name to her. But what her bones were about to reveal reached far past her, straight into millions of people who have never once thought about her. Right now, that same genetic marker is sitting inside more than 19% of African Americans. In some coastal communities, it climbs past 34%. For decades, an assumption held firm. An exact origin like this was supposed to be lost forever, erased by centuries of the slave trade. No single African group could ever be traced this precisely, this many generations later. The moment this sequence came back, that assumption was wrong. It pointed to one exact stretch of the West African coast. The scientist was Dr. Rick Kittles. That bone belonged to a woman whose motherline traced back to one specific people. Her name had almost vanished from her own family, 200 years before anyone thought to look. This story has 2 halves. Both of them will surprise you. Half one is what the DNA found once science finally cracked open a 200-year-old seal. Half 2 is the story of the people behind that marker. History tried to erase them, but their blood is still moving through millions of people alive right now. Dr. Kittles didn't just trust his first result. A single test run once doesn't prove much. Tests can go wrong. Samples can get mixed up. So before he believed it, he ruled all of that out first. Then he checked his results against other scientists' work. Different research teams studying fully different groups of people kept finding the same mark. A 2013 study by Johnson and Shrestha found it across African Americans nationwide. A 2025 study by Caldwell and his team found it again at even higher rates in the Gullah Geechee groups of the American Southeast. 2 separate teams, 2 separate groups, the same exact fingerprint. That's a pattern too strong to ignore. One of them slipped through anyway. He left behind a record nobody meant for us to find. By the end of this video, you'll know more about that history than most record books ever let show. Stay with me. For most of the last 100 years, if you asked a historian where African American ancestry came from, you'd get one broad, vague answer: West Africa. That label felt safe. It felt final. It let genealogists give families an answer without promising more than paper records could prove. Hundreds of different kingdoms, languages, and cultures, Igbo, Yoruba, Akan, Congo, all folded into one flat category. And on paper, that idea seemed to make sense. Slave ship manifests, the lists traders kept, recorded numbers, not names, just age, sex, and market price. So the thinking went, if the paper trail disappeared, the ancestry disappeared too. But the paper trail tells a different story once you know where to look. Between 1650 and 1807, the Bight of Biafra was one of the busiest slave ports in the entire trade. Over 1.6 million people were forced out through that one stretch of coast. In places like Jamaica and colonial Virginia, people taken from that coast made up between 30 and 45% of all enslaved Africans who arrived. That's a massive, well-recorded wave of one exact people, moved again and again for over 150 years. So the numbers were always there. The scale was always there. What was missing was biological proof. Proof that this exact history had survived inside living people the whole time, sitting inside human cells nobody had thought to test. Before we get to the reveal, hit subscribe if you want more stories like this one. Stories where science finally answers a question history tried to bury. To understand how scientists cracked this case, you need one small fact about biology. It's simpler than it sounds. Most of your DNA is a mix, half from your mother, half from your father, shuffled together every generation. That mixing makes it hard to trace very far back. But one small piece of your DNA doesn't mix at all. It's called mitochondrial DNA. It passes only from mother to child, generation after generation, untouched by anyone in between. Every mother hands this exact DNA to her daughter, and that daughter hands it to her own daughter after that. Sons carry it too, but they can't pass it forward. Only daughters can. That means if you trace this one thread far enough, you land on one unbroken mother line. Mother to mother to mother, stretching back centuries. War couldn't touch it. Forced moves couldn't touch it. Not even a name change on a plantation record could touch it. It just kept moving forward inside the body, waiting for someone to finally ask the right question. Genetic studies inside one region of southeastern Nigeria found exact versions of this marker showing up again and again. Scientists group these markers into families called haplogroups and name them with codes like L2A, L1B1A, and L3E2B. In that region today, these markers show up in 10 to 35% of the people, depending on which exact group you're looking at. Then, scientists compared those same markers against African American people. The numbers lined up almost perfectly. Not close, almost identical. Look at the actual figures, side by side. In that region of Nigeria, the L2A marker shows up in roughly 20 to 35% of people. Among African Americans studied by Johnson and Shrestha, that same marker showed up in 19.8%. The L1B marker sits at 10 to 18% there and 10.2% in the African American sample. The L3E marker runs 12 to 22% there and 13.5% among African Americans. 3 separate markers, 3 separate matches, each one landing almost just where the science predicted. And in Gullah Geechee groups on the southeast coast, the numbers run even higher. The L2A marker alone shows up in 28% of that group. Combined L3 markers reached nearly 55%. This group stayed more cut off from the outside world for longer than most. Their DNA shows it. The motherline thread held on even tighter here than almost anywhere else in the diaspora. That's the word we use for a people spread far from their original home. The evidence showed this. The DNA sample Dr. Kittles tested from the New York African Burial Ground carried the L2A marker and the L1B1A marker. Those markers are concentrated almost entirely in one place, the Bight of Biafra, home of the Igbo people. Remember that number from earlier? Over 19% of African Americans and up to 34% in some coastal groups carry this exact same mark today. That's a living thread connecting millions of people right now to one specific African people. One name sits underneath all of it, Igbo. To understand what was lost, we need to meet one person whose story survived. He's a rare exception in a system built to erase everyone. Around 1792, in the Igbo hinterland, the inland region of what is now southeastern Nigeria, a child was born. They named him Aniaso. He grew up in a rich, structured world. Igbo society at the time ran on its own advanced systems. Women held real political power through a council called the Umuada, made up of daughters of the group who settled disputes and ran local markets. Spiritual life centered on a belief called Odinani. It held that every person carries a personal guiding spirit called a Chai from the moment they're born. Extended families, called Umuna, meant nobody in Igbo society stood alone. Around 1802, when Aniaso was about 10 years old, that world was torn away. He was kidnapped, marched to the coast, and sold onto a ship bound for Jamaica. Think about that for a second. 10 years old. Old enough to remember his home, old enough to remember his language, and his own name. When he landed, his name was gone. The family that bought him, the Monteiths, called him Toby. On paper, Toby was property, an official label, a line item, a body assigned a job. But the real story, saved because he later learned to read and write, was more complicated. Over years of forced labor, he earned trust. That trust earned him the role of overseer, a job with some real authority. But the system still legally owned him. He carried one mark of his original identity his whole life. Ichi scars on his face cut into his skin as a child following Igbo tradition. Underneath the name Toby, Aniaso never fully disappeared. By the 1830s, something in his situation began to shift. For years, Aniaso had saved his own wages. Eventually, he had enough, 50 pounds, enough to buy his own freedom. The man who enslaved him did not want to let him go. The same skills that made Aniaso valuable, his reliability, his role as overseer, were just what his enslaver wanted to keep. This decision was never really about Aniaso as a person. It was a calculation, weighing what he was worth free against what he was worth kept. In 1837, Aniaso won that calculation. He bought his own freedom. Once free, he took on a new name, Archibald Monteth. Decades later, in 1864, he sat down and told his life story to Moravian missionaries under that new name. That single act saved his birth year, his Igbo name, his scars, and his memory of home, details that would have otherwise vanished for good. Almost no enslaved Igbo woman got that chance. This is what usually got written down instead, a real line from a real shipping record. Shipped aboard the vessel Anne, 3 Negro females, age approximately 20 to 25, sound of limb. That's the entire historical record for 3 human beings. It has no names, no hometowns, no family. Just an age and a note about physical condition written the way you'd describe cattle. Other records used labels like Igbo gal, reducing an entire heritage, an entire family line, to 2 words on a page. Records like these are just the kind of gap that erased the burial ground woman's name too. Aniaso got to tell his own story because he lived long enough and learned enough to write it down himself. The mothers whose mitochondrial DNA lives inside millions of people today never got that chance. Their names are gone. Their voices are gone. The only thing that survived them is a molecular mark written by biology itself in a language no plantation owner ever learned to read. It's been sitting inside their descendants ever since, waiting 200 years to be read. This erasure was a system built on purpose with clear steps. The moment a person was bought, their African name was gone. A European name replaced it. That cut off any way to trace their family line by name. New captives went through what plantation owners called seasoning. It was 1 to 3 years of forced conditioning. The goal was to wipe out their native language and any sign of African culture. People who spoke the same language were often split up on purpose so they couldn't organize or pass their culture down as a group. And every official record reduced a full human being to an age, a sex, and a price. 4 separate methods, all aimed at the same goal: erase the exact person and leave only a generic label behind. This part is almost hard to take in. That mother line marker didn't stop with one generation. It moved from mother to daughter, then to her daughter, then to hers again. It carried through slavery. It carried through freedom, through the Great Migration north, through 100 years of families who had no idea what they were carrying inside their own cells. Nobody in that chain knew. The grandmother who was born free still couldn't say where her people came from. The mother who raised children in a northern city 100 years after slavery ended had no idea either. Neither did the daughter who moved even further, into a new decade, a new city, a new version of American life. Every single one of them carried a precise, unbroken biological thread back to one specific mother in the Igbo hinterland. And not one of them could have named it. Today, that same thread runs through millions of living African Americans. That same Gullah Geechee group from earlier holds one of the highest combined rates in the entire diaspora. The 2025 Caldwell study found that over 82% of the people there carry direct African motherline markers. And DNA wasn't the only thing that survived. Culture found its own quiet way through too, even when nobody knew where it came from. Jamaican patois still uses the word unu, meaning you all, taken straight from the Igbo language. The word obaya, tied to spiritual practice, and the root of the word obeya comes from the same source. Traditional dishes built around yams and leafy greens are still cooked in kitchens across the diaspora today. They echo old Igbo cooking methods, passed down without a name attached. None of these details prove anything on their own, but stacked next to the DNA, they paint the same picture from a different angle. This culture didn't vanish. It went quiet, and it waited. In 2003, Dr. Rick Kittles teamed up with Dr. Gina Page to found African Ancestry Incorporated. Together, they built a reference database of more than 30,000 African DNA samples. That database is what makes reunions like this possible in the first place. People carrying markers like L201F or L3E2B have used it to make verified connections to living Igbo groups in southeastern Nigeria today. People separated for over 200 years, brought back together through nothing but a molecule. Today, the Igbo people are one of the largest, most active cultural groups in the world. Over 45 million people live in southeastern Nigeria alone, with a global diaspora spread across North America, Europe, and beyond. Writers like Chinua Achebe brought Igbo storytelling to the whole world. Traditions like the Iri Ji, the New Yam Festival, are still celebrated today. Online, groups sometimes called Igbo Twitter connect diaspora descendants with living relatives back in Nigeria. They welcome people in who show up with nothing more than a DNA result and a question about where they come from. And there's a real irony sitting at the center of this whole story. Every step of that system, the renaming, the seasoning, the flattened records, was built on purpose to make sure none of this survived. It failed. Every single time it failed. No overseer, no ship captain, and no clerk with a ledger could ever reach it. The one thing they could never touch was a strand of mitochondrial DNA. It passed from mother to daughter, sealed and untouched, all the way to right now. In Igbo belief, every person carries a chai, a personal spirit connected to their ancestors. Maybe this molecular thread is the closest thing science has to proving that idea true. It's an inner light that no bill of sale, no chain, and no system could ever put out. They tried to make her disappear into the ledger books of history, down to a blank line, an age, and a price. Nothing else. The record survived anyway. It moved somewhere they could never reach. It moved into the cells of her daughters and her granddaughters, and into the millions of descendants living right now who still carry her exact biological mark inside them. Sit with this question. An entire slave system tried to cut millions of people off from ever knowing their exact Igbo mothers, and the answer has been sitting inside their own cells this whole time. So whose stolen name do you think is still waiting inside yours, ready to be found? If this kind of story pulls you in, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.